Brittany! Oh, what, Becky? Brittany! What, Becky? Do you like Starbucks? I fucking love Starbucks. Brittany, they've got 10% off of mocha frappuccinos this week only. Oh my Jesus. We should totes go to Starbucks and get some fraps after class.
Oh, if I have to do those voices again, I'm gonna totes merge myself. Anyways, let's get basic in a different manner of speaking.
Let's get basic. Really, really basic. With my Ugga Boota basic. Really, really basic.
Oh my. There's a lot of theory that's taught when you're beginning to draw, and frankly, it can end up being kind of dry. But it is extremely important to understand if you want to make good-looking art. Like me, and my ever-expanding lineup of fluffy cringe monsters. I'll be going over a couple of premises you'll need to keep in mind when thinking about how and what to draw. For this video, I'm gonna focus on how to break down and build up a scene rather than technique. There are already plenty of other tutorials and videos out there on how to do this. A couple of people that I'd recommend for looking at some of these would be Proco, Draw with Jazza, or Synchro. So for this, I'm basically gonna go over two things. Lines and volumes. That's it. Really, that's it. That's all you need. Now, just because that's all you need doesn't mean that it's not very important, because this is essential if you're gonna be drawing. Basically, this is the main premise and the main basics of how you're gonna build every single one of your drawings, probably from here on out. Granted, you won't be drawing spheres and lines the way that I will be in this video 100% of the time, but once it does get into your head, you'll be able to think about all this stuff every time you draw, and you'll definitely see a large improvement if you keep this in mind, or at least I hope you do. I know I did. In any case, that's enough of me rambling on, and we should just jump right in. So let's get started with lines.
So I managed to mess up the last recording, so this is actually me doing take 2. It's been 2 hours and I'm cranky. So as you can imagine, this is gonna go about as well as two blind people trying to have sex.
Okay, right, lines. We're starting with lines. So when thinking about lines, it's really thinking about how the eye moves and how the eye moves across a piece of artwork, or in my case, a piece of cringy OC Sparkle Dog, God knows what, eyesore. It just needs to move across the page, basically is what I'm saying. Now, this is done in a lot of different ways, and I'm going to go over a couple of ways how you do it. The basic two lines that we're going to be using in general is going to be the regular arc, which is just an arc kind of like that, and an S-curve, which is like that. They can be as long and straight or as bowed out as you can make it. It really doesn't matter. So what I'm going to use is we're going to go over a bit of how this is used in pieces of artwork. The first example that I'm going to use is just basically a comic. What we have here is we have just a basic comic strip. So in Western culture, you read from left to right, and that's how most good comics are lined out. This is a comic that I did from Inktober of 2017. If you haven't heard of Inktober, it's amazing. It's also terrible. It's like the Schrodinger's cat of art challenges. It's both the best and worst thing you could possibly do during the month of Inktober. And if you ever do it, you will understand exactly why. So when doing comics, you basically make it read the exact same way that you read a book, where you go from left over here to right there. And then you go down, and then you do it again. And then you go down, and then you do it again. And this is the most basic example of how you use lines, because we take away this image, and I drew it on the image because I'm great. Now we take away the back image, and we're left with this. And these are just lines. This is a zigzag pattern of a line. And that's kind of the premise that we're going to use throughout the rest of the examples. It's just lines. It's not hard. It's an easy premise. And because it's an easy premise, it's easy to learn, and it should hopefully be a decently easy task to implement. Granted, it will take time, but you'll get it. So we're going to go over something that's a little bit more complicated in this example, and I'm going to focus a bit more on this one, which is a commission I did for a friend of mine, and we're going to use this as an example of what you want to do, or just the lines that we're going to see in it. I'm going to zoom out a bit. Let's go in right about there. Now we're going to look at this and see, okay, what lines do we have in this drawing? And this is going to be general composition stuff. When looking at general composition, you're going to notice lines. The first big line that I notice is right at the sword in this focal point, which is the brightest part of the image. And it's purposefully the brightest part because it basically means that whoever is looking at this image is going to immediately look at this lightning. The cool thing is that it's attached to a sword, which is in and of itself a line. And then it goes up an arm, which is also a line, and then it leads right to the head. And the head is the secondary and main focal point that we're actually going to want to focus on, because it shows that face of determination that every furry should have when trying to battle online haters. We also have a secondary line right here, which is also leading up to the face. And then we have an S curve right there that kind of leads up the body. And then we have the action line, which is this line, basically the exact same one right here. And they all lead to the face of this edgy sparkle dog character. Yes, Shock, I'm talking about you. You're always going to be an edgy sparkle dog to me.
But for retrospect, Shock is the guy in the image.
Go check out his channel.
We also have some lines in the background, which are just this little flag, string of flags right here, and then we got like the basic shapes of all of the buildings and whatnot. These aren't really as important because they're not the main focus of the image, and you're going to be focusing more on the character and the lines and the sublunary lines in the character. But when you do use it for a background, it does actually come into play. So here's a background that I don't know how I managed to pull off, because I just don't know. Like, this is just way too good for my skill level, in my opinion. And honestly, sometimes I don't know how I pull these images out of my ass. The big one that is immediate is this one that comes right down here. This arcing line that is from just this giant pillar that's coming down. This rock pillar. And when we get down here, we kind of can go one of two ways. We can go off to this side and then up right back the top onto the cliffs, or we can go along this river and then lead back into the back of the image, and then this points right back up at the top. It's just generally kind of flows like a giant S-curve, and I didn't realize when I initially made it why this image looked so good and why I felt it was so appealing, but you really kind of get this sense of flow. There's also this huge sky area right back here that your eyes can rest. And that's also really important. Just a side note, if you have an area where your eyes can rest in an image, it makes it that much better. Asymmetry can go a long way. And there's lines just kind of like, it's a cliff, so you got like this huge U area right in here. All of these U's just kind of the cliffs, kind of going off in that direction, kind of going down. And I've ruined my drawing. I hope I didn't draw on the wrong layer, that would suck. And that's good. That's good. Compositionally wise, it's good to know about that. And it helps you learn about how compositions are made. The thing is, that's not the only thing it can be used for. And that's not the main thing I do use it for. The main thing I use it for is for character designs. These are two Aussies, as far as I know. This first one is the Picards, the Picari Rue, the one only Rue of Picari. She's just shouting. She or he is just shouting. I'll go with he, because Picari looks more like a he in this example. And then the other one, I believe, is for Blue the Dragon. Yeah, no, it's Trash the Protogen. It's from his Protogen species thing. Oh my god, I completely forgot about that. Yeah, it even says fuck off on the visor screen. Oh man, what am I doing with my life? So, this is good, and the best part about this is that we're going to use the same premise of composition with lines, except now we're going to use it on characters. So we'll start off with Kari, because it's a very simple premise, and we're going to start off with the action line, which just goes straight down like this. I need to use a different color because that is, with this, we're going to use the action line, which is right here. And then we have a split off from the action line, which is right here. Now notice that the action line is an S-curve, and then we have the two legs that kind of come off of it. And then we have the tail that also is an arcing or a bow line back here. And then we have kind of a bow line for the shoulders, just to kind of notice that. For the ears as well. And then for the head, just kind of facing out that way, just to kind of give it that direction, especially with the head. I feel like it's kind of important to do that. Not a lot of people do it, but it's a nice help for me sometimes. And we got the two bows, the arms, right there. Now we're going to move on to Trash the Protogen, and we're going to use the same premise. Now the immediate line that I see on this character is this one that just is from the arms. This big arcing bow that includes the shoulders, the upper arm, and in this case we're just going to use a little bit more of a bow right here for the lower part of the left arm. The next part is going to be the action line, or line of the spine, and that is just going to be kind of this little S-curve right here. And then we'll have that actually curve out into the tail, like so. There we go. We're also going to draw a larger, like a bow for the upper area of the leg, because it's digigrade, because I love my digigrade legs. And then same thing, bow up here, and then we're gonna have this. We're gonna have a bow up here and a bow down here. These can be S-curves if they're stretched out a bit, but in this case they're not going to be. I'm actually gonna add just kind of a line right here, Hikari's, just to kind of level it out, define it more. Now the cool thing about this is now that when we take the layer off, or we take the actual drawings off, we're left with this. Now this doesn't initially seem like a whole lot, but this is the basis, the bare bones of what drawing is about. These are what I would consider the very roots of figure drawing. Now figure drawing is a drawing that basically allows you to build the character off of it. So all of these these original drawings are based off of lines that were very similar to these ones. And because of that, the characters look dynamic. And a dynamic character is very important. And it's probably the best thing you can ask for when you're drawing, is if your character looks dynamic, it means it looks real, and it means it looks flowing. It's because of these drawings down here that I'm able to do this type of edgier, angular style and have the characters not look that blocky. Granted, they still do, because the style, but they definitely could be worse. They could also be better. I mean, they could not be furries, that would help. I need to draw more humans. But a picture is not only just lines and curves. There's more to it than that, and that's where I'm gonna focus next, is because lines are a huge part of it. There's no denying that. Lines make up a lot of the drawing, but there's another huge section that we need to focus on. Shut up. That we need to focus on if we're going to make a finished piece with these very fundamentals and basics, and that is volumes. The purpose of drawing, in the sense that I'm trying to talk about, is to create the illusion of three-dimensional space. For this reason, I dislike the premise of the traditional shapes in a drawing to make it look good. I think this is a backwards way of thinking, because shapes in and of themselves are pretty two-dimensional. You think of a triangle, a circle, a square. Those are two-dimensional shapes. What I would rather people think about, and what I'm going to tell you guys to think about, is to think of those shapes not as two-dimensional geometrical objects, but as three-dimensional volumes. The reason you want to think about this is because you're trying to create the illusion of 3 dimensions, therefore you should think in 3 dimensions. Granted, the shapes will end up being two-dimensional shapes on a piece of paper, but the important thing is to think of those as volumes. I'm gonna turn to my script page now. My fragile masculinity is screaming at the top of its lungs in agony right now. So because we're thinking in 3 dimensions, we're going to be able to give off the illusion of 3 dimensions, and the person looking at our art is going to think that it's 3-dimensional. So most drawings can be broken down into 3 different types of volumes, and we have a sphere, so like that. We have a sphere. We have a cylinder. And we have a square. Or we have a cube. My bad. Cube. Not a square. It's like the one thing that I told you not to draw. How terrible am I at words? And these are the 3 shapes. Now, you can use variations of each. So, for example, a sphere can be an ellipsoid, which is like more like a squashed sphere, like this. Like so. Just kind of squashed on one side. These are very useful. A cylinder will normally be tapered for me at one end, which means it's smaller at the top or at the bottom, and then it kind of gets a little bit larger. I've never used cones, which is weird because it's like one of the main ones that they teach in like a traditional art sense is to use cones and stuff, especially in high school. I don't find them very useful. I'll be honest. And then for a cube, we're going to be using like a squished box. So squishing it a bit, like so. And these are basically the 3 shapes that I use for most, if not all, of my drawings to kind of think about it. Granted, I won't draw these shapes all the time because I think about them in the back of my head and I'm normally able to put them on paper without actually drawing them. And once you get better and better at this stuff, you will be able to do that more and more. I will still go back to these shapes if I don't know how to draw something or if I think I need to double check. It's good to have these in your arsenal. And what I'm going to do now is I'm actually going to just shrink these a little bit because there's one more thing that we kind of need to go over before we actually go into depth on how to use these, and that is perspective. Now I know most people when they think about perspective, or at least most artists that I know when they draw perspective, normally have to set up a pentagram with Bob Ross in the middle and expensive art supplies on each side, and granted, it's not the easiest thing to do. I'm just going to go over a couple of things that we need to think about when drawing in 3 dimensions, and that is an object in the foreground, or that's closer to you, is larger than an object in the background. So something like this, it's like we know that this object right here is probably closer than this object. And this premise will follow for basic shapes too. So if we draw a cube that has a close-up section and then a farther away section, the face that's closer to you is going to be larger than the face that's farther away from you. So the face in front, right here, and then there's the face in the back, which is going to be a bit smaller. Simple premise like that. And that's all we need to know right now, is that an object that's closer to you is going to be larger and an object that's farther from you is going to be smaller. And then the lines that attach them are basically going to follow that, are just going to connect them together. It's pretty simple. It's just like, just object closer, object farther, connect, connect. There, you have a 3-dimensional shape. Cool, you drew it in perspective. Hooray. So we're gonna go back to Kari and trash the protogen, because I don't know why I drew these. Kinda seems odd. Like most people are like, what do you draw fan art of? Oh, I draw fan art of my favorite cartoon shows. What do you draw fan art of? Bunch of losers who talk in front of a camera. They're not losers. They're actually really chill people. I've talked to both, or at least had a conversation with both. I'm pretty sure I came off as creepy, both of them. I'm sorry, you guys. Oh man, I sound like a wonderful person right now. Anywho, we'll start with Bakari. And one of the things that I like to start with is the chest, which is going to be the rib cage, is generally going to be, I'm drawn on the same layer. Cool. Generally going to be a ovoid. So like that. We're gonna have a nice ovoid there. Gonna just give a little bit of a. We're gonna give it a little bit of a crosshatch, just so that we know the orientation. We're gonna do the same thing for the head, which is a sphere in this case. And we'll just have the crosshatch there, just to face the direction as well. Then we're gonna have the cylinder. I'm gonna erase here just so that's easier for you guys to see. The cylinder for the head, or for the snout, which is very similar to a cup. We're going to have the ears, which are actually going to be a cone, or very similar, or a cone that's cut in half, like that. So I guess I do use cones every now and then. Neck, just add it as a cylinder right there. Think of it as a cylinder, is a cylinder. Shoulders, we're going to have spheres right there. Gonna do again some more erasing just so that it's easier for you guys to follow along. Over there. And then we're gonna have that tapered type of cylinder for the lower arms. And we're just gonna have a regular cylinder for the upper arms. Like so. I might actually leave this arm out just because it'll be confusing and it'll rough up the rest of the sketch. We're going to use a box for the hand, like so. And then for the lower section, I'm actually going to use a sphere, a larger sphere, because of the geometry of this soda kangaroo. And then we're going to use another ovoid right here, and another ovoid right there. When I did this on the first recording, I ended up making the understructure look like a giant dick, so I'm kind of glad I redid this. Anywho, shouldn't have told you guys that one. And then we're just going to use kind of just a line, like 2 lines. Then we're just going to kind of section it off, because this is going to be one of those shapes that is definitely one of the more unorthodox for the tail. So it's not going to be really a cone or any of the things that I've talked about. It's generally going to be its own type of shape. We're going to use cylinders right here, and then cylinders for... We're just going to erase that. We're going to use cylinders for the feet, like so. If I am an unfunny tit, please don't watch me, or please tell me, because it's my job to entertain people, and if I'm not doing that, then please find somebody else. Please. Oh my god. What am I doing? See, I'm like the one person that I know who could sound like a complete ass and a complete loser all at the same time. Wait, I know tons of people who can do that. What am I doing? I should just not talk and just draw. So, we're gonna add like a little bit of a cylinder right in here too. And just kind of erase that off. And there we go. So, we'll just label that off right now. And then we're gonna move on to the protogen right here. We're gonna make the cylinders right here. Kind of block it off. The cylinder down below. Cylinder up above, and a cylinder right here too. And we're gonna have like a little, for the hand, I'm just gonna make it a sphere right now because it's in a clenched fist. We're gonna make it, actually we're gonna make it a little block. I changed my mind. I'm a renegade. And I sound like a loser. I'm gonna need to find better comedy material than just making fun of myself, because that only works for so long. And then we're gonna draw the head. Gonna do the little crosshairs thing again, just to kind of give off that sphere. even though it's under all this floof, we're going to draw the cylinder for the neck, and then we're going to draw the ribcage, even though it's basically just a giant compartment of metal. It still has that basic spherical or ellipsoidal shape. And we're going to do the same ellipsoid for the bottom, like so. This is like, you know when you're building a snowman? This is basically like building a snowman, except you're doing it in more parts, and you could never do it out of snow. That probably means it's a bad analogy. I'm going to redo those crosshairs so that they better match. I'm going to do it right there. And I'm actually going to draw the visor because it's again one of those shapes that isn't very orthodox. So we're going to just kind of label that off right there. And right, shoulders, giant spheres, especially for protogens, because they're robots and they have, I don't know, probably like electronics under there. Don't know what electronics would be in a protogen. Like, I'm an engineering major, but even I am like, how do you make an augmented cyborg that looks cute? It's like my goal in life is to create an actual living protogen. That's a weird life goal. But you know what? Hey, to each their own. Probably not the weirdest. Might be the weirdest. I don't know. At least I'm not the one person who wants to become a mattress. I am the mattress bitch. I fucking love you, goody dubs. So we're gonna label, kind of give some crosshairs just to make sure that you still understand that it's a volume. I trust that most of the people watching this understand that and are probably skipping through the video at this point because I'm being just so slow and cringy. And for the tail, again, we're gonna have that very weird volumetric shape. Like this. So, just gonna give it some ribs so that you can tell that it's a volume. And everything is bright red. Gonna do some cylinders for the legs too. Like so. And then we're gonna add a half sphere for the feet. That. Same thing over here. And cylinder. Now, drum roll please. I can only do it with one hand because I gotta click on stuff. So dumb. And there we go. Now what we see here is we actually have volumed character designs. And they don't look half bad. This is basically what I'm doing right here is I'm breaking down the characters in the same way I normally build them up. So what we have is we have a bunch of geometric shapes that, or geometric volumes, what have I been pushing this whole time, that all come together and make these characters. So that's pretty much it. The line's right here, and then over that we're gonna draw volumes. And then over both of those, we do line work and coloring and everything else. And we come up with a finished, finalized design. Now, it's very important to do these things first because that's how everything goes together. You can break up anything in any way you want to, in all honesty. You could use blocks, you could use spheres, you could use triangles for this. Me specifically, I generally like to use cylinders and spheres. That's not the only way to do it. I would suggest experimenting around with different shapes and find out what works best for you. I'm going to use these premises to make two scenes. I'm going to do one with the character, and then I'm going to do one with a scene. So hold on to your britches, boys and girls. Time to do a speed run.
So the first drawing that I did was of a landscape, and for this landscape I decided to do mountains and river and some trees. So what I started off with is a ledge, which would kind of be like the main focal point, and I added the mountains in the background to kind of bring the eye across the piece from left to right, like I mentioned earlier. The river in the background is also meant to flow back up from that cliff so that your eye can move around the image. I added trees in a pattern of larger to smaller to implement
perspective that I was talking about earlier. And overall, the idea for this was to create a visually pleasing design that would move your eye across the drawing. So for the second image, I decided to create a wolf character, and I started off with the lines to make the general figure and flow of the design, and then I used the volumes to kind of beef up the areas, or the muscles, and general areas of mass. I used the ellipsoids, the cylinders, and the boxes all in one image, as well as an odd-sized one for the tail. Now, one thing that I do want to go into is that details in a drawing are basically using this same volumetric premise, just on a smaller and smaller scale. At some point, you're going to get so small that it's just unnecessary to do it anymore, and you've got a finished piece.
Well, here you go. With lines and volumes, you can pretty much create any image that you want. This way of thinking will help you understand what you should be looking for and how to break down certain drawings, objects, and scenes. So try to use this type of thinking when you're referencing other images. Definitely try to draw things at different angles using this type of theory and method. This is going to be the most helpful thing when you're learning. This is going to be super helpful for you to break down objects and condense things in a way that you can understand. This is very helpful for me, and it still is helpful for me when I'm breaking down things and objects and characters and stuff. So thank you guys for watching. I hope this video was helpful, and I'll see you back in the next one. So yeah, bye!